to talk about equations with variables on each side. And one of the things you have to remember is you got to get all of your variables to one side of the equation because you need to solve for that variable. You won't be able to solve for it if they're on both sides of the equation. So if we have 8 plus 4d equals 5d, I've got to get them on the same side of the equation. What I like to do is try and do it so that, number one, if it, for example, this 5d is by itself already. So if I take the 4d over, then everything's all by itself, all the d's are on one side, and that ends up being a good way to solve the equation. So to get that 4d over to the other side, I need to do the opposite operation. Right now it's being added, so I'm going to subtract. And I'm going to end up with 8, because 4d minus 4d is 0, equals d, 1d, right? And I'm done. So that was a very simplified version of what you're going to see. So let's try the next one.
Wait, how come you don't times 5 and 4?
Whoa.
Because you're subtracting. 5d's minus 4d's is 1d.
Oh.
Okay? So, if we have a problem like this that just becomes a little bit more complicated, because I have more I have numbers in addition to the variables on both sides. This is where I like to try and stay positive. I could subtract 6n from both sides, but then I'm going to get a negative. And I try to avoid that. So I'm going to subtract the 4n from both sides. Now you don't want to try and combine too many steps at once, because that's where you get lost. So I'm just going to take care of my n's. I end up with 2n minus 1 equals negative 5. Now I've got to continue to solve for n. I need to get rid of the 1 first, then I get rid of what's being multiplied to the variable last. So to get rid of the 1, I'm going to do the opposite operation, add 1, and I'll get 2n, because negative 1 plus 1 is 0, equals negative 5 plus 1, negative 4. And now all I have to do is separate that 2 from the n to solve for n. Multiplication is happening there, so I'm going to divide because that's the opposite operation, and I end up with n equals negative 2. Okay, so we're going to look at when we have fractions in these multi-step equations. So if I have 1/2 p plus 7 equals 3/4 p plus 9. One way to deal with these fractions is to decide what the common denominator is, which in this case is 4. And you multiply every term in the entire equation by 4. So it's called killing the fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4. When I do that, I am able to go ahead and get rid of the denominators. Now I'm going to get all my p's on one side. And in this case, I'm going to take the 2 p's over to the right, because then I'll continue to hopefully have positive numbers, but in this case I can see it's not going to be. But I'm going to subtract 2p from both sides because I've got to get all the p's on one side. So I end up with 28 equals p plus 36. 3p minus 2p is 1p. So now I'm going to subtract 36. And I'm going to get 60 plus 8 is 8. And a negative 8 for P. One of the ways you can test this is to go plug it into the original equation to make sure that you got the right answer.